Welcome to the Art of Healing with your host, Dr. Judy, Jasek of Animal Healing Arts, and Matt Rowe of ParsleyPet. During our show, we are talking about your pet's health, raw feeding, and alternative treatments for cancer, unexplained illnesses, and supporting your pet's natural ability to heal. Welcome, Dr. Judy, to this week's show.
Thanks, Matt. Can't wait to talk about raw food some more. One of my favorite topics.
That's right. And, you know, when we look at raw feeding and everything we do for our pets in that space, there's so many benefits to raw feeding. And so what we want to do is we wanted to take a look at what could be some of the barriers to entry to getting that ultimate health for your dog by feeding your dog the way it was meant to be fed. And we talked about it at the end of last week's show, and we came up with the idea of how do you even start raw feeding? Because there's all these questions. What should I do? Where do I get it from? Should I buy this? How much do I give them? Do we take a look at some of these areas, and should I mix in kibble with it? So there's all these questions with raw feeding. And that's why we thought it would be very important to have a discussion about raw feeding once again on today's show. So thank you for debunking some of the myths about raw feeding and helping everybody that's watching right now make that first leap towards health for their pet. So I have to ask the question, Dr. Judy, should I mix kibble in with the raw food that I feed my dog?
Well, you know, there aren't very many absolutes in the world, but this is an absolutely no. Don't ever do that. There's different ways we can work with the transition if we need to with different pets, but you don't ever want to mix the two. And the reason is they're digested very, very differently. The ingredients are so different. They move through the digestive tract at different speeds. And we're trying to get the digestive tract used to digesting a new food, the raw food, and at the same time feeding the old food. And it's like you're just confusing the whole process. You're not going to get that transition made if you're feeding both at the same time. So absolutely not.
All right. I love that answer because it's so crystal clear. So some of the concerns that I think some individuals have with feeding raw is it's raw. Like really, when I feed Leo and Mr. Cha-Cha, I take a 2-pound tube of raw meat mixed with organ and bone, and I cut off the amount of ounces that they should be eating per meal. And that's it. I don't do anything else. I put it in the container, make sure that I only have 3 days in the refrigerator. Everything else is frozen. And then I just cycle through the frozen and what I have thawing in the refrigerator so it doesn't sit for too long in the refrigerator, just like the food that I eat. And that's it. So should I have concerns with feeding my pet just raw meat?
No, absolutely none. I guess this is another absolute. As long as it's, you know, it's been handled properly. So you do, yes, it's raw. So you do need to think about raw. You need to think about safe handling for raw. So it's no different than if, you know, you were to go buy meat at the grocery store, if you eat meat yourself, and you're going to wash the utensils afterwards. You're not going to leave it sit in the refrigerator thawed for more than 72 hours, because at that point you could get some bacterial contamination. But this whole school of thought, and I hear this all the time, that this raw food is it just comes to you contaminated with bacteria and parasites and all these horrible things. It just isn't true. And there's actually nothing ever been proven. Raw food gets blamed for a lot of pets getting sick, but a definitive proof of that does not exist. Meaning, so a dog, say, gets salmonella or E. coli or really bad bacterial infection, and they eat raw, and it's automatically blamed on the raw. Well, actually going back to that raw and checking it and seeing if the same bacteria that made the dog sick is in the raw, that's never done. So there's no definitive proof of that. That is all propaganda. It's all hearsay. And feeding raw, as long as you use safe handling, is completely safe.
And it's that, part of that 72 hours in the refrigerator, just like our meat, we're not going to let it sit in there for too long. We're going to allow it to cycle through. So that's something that I do on my end is I have plastic containers, like Tupperware containers I bought from the grocery store, those little cheap ones that you buy from, I think Rubbermaid makes them. And I buy the same size one. And then I have a scale, and I put my food on the scale, and you guys have seen me do this in a video. And then I add the total amount of ounces that I need to add per meal based upon a calculation. So what calculation do you use to determine what's the amount of food you feed Wiley?
Well, the average rule of thumb for an adult dog is around 2% of the body weight. So I do it based on as a starting point. We're always ultimately need to look at how the individual pet is doing, but as a starting point, around 2%. So a 50-pound dog then would eat about a pound. And so, I have little Wileys, like, he's 10 pounds. So he eats probably about 3 ounces a day. But then I look at how he's doing. If I'm like, boy, Wiley seems like he's lost a little bit of weight. Maybe I need to bump that up a little bit. There's something going on. Or maybe we have gone for some longer walks lately and he needs a little more. On the other end, he's put on a little bit of weight. Oh, we need to back off a little bit. Puppies will double or triple that sometimes. I mean, I see young puppies that, 9-10-week-old puppies that will eat as much as an adult dog because they're growing. So their energy demands are much, much higher. So that is different. I just put that out there because you do have to look at the pet. And in puppies, you're supporting growth. So it's trickier in puppies. Once you have an adult dog, you can usually settle on an amount, like you were saying, that's probably going to be appropriate for them 95% of the time, unless something changes in their routine. Puppies are a little trickier because they go through growth spurts and you got to increase and then, you're supporting that growth process. So it's probably good to have some guidance from somebody that's familiar with feeding raw if you're feeding raw to a puppy. And the other thing I want to be sure to mention along with proper handling is making sure you're using a balanced raw and balanced blends. I don't go to the grocery store and buy some hamburger and say, okay, I got a 50-pound dog, I'm going to feed him a pound of hamburger every day. That's not a balanced diet. So you do need to make sure that you're feeding balanced blends. And when you get the blends that are, from the, the pet food manufacturers that make these balanced blends, most of them are pretty complete. But again, getting a little bit of guidance to get started with your particular pet is probably a good idea. But it really is as easy as you're saying. Thaw it out, put it in the dish, pretty much.
Yep. And that's it is, you're looking at that. And so when I had that question about a balanced diet, everybody kept saying, when I first started digging into this years ago, everybody kept saying, oh, you have to have a balance. And it seemed like this gregarious word that had no meaning to me. I know what it means, but I'm like, oh, I have no idea if you mean balance, like I'm supposed to put treats with it, or if I'm supposed to add, goat milk to it. I didn't know. So really on the balance side, Casey Maxwell, one of my mentors, basically really just aptly, I'd asked her like 4 or 5 times and trying to get to the root. She goes, Matt, it's very simple. Your dog is wild. And if your dog was wild, it would catch a rabbit in the field and it would eat the rabbit. And what's in the rabbit? The rabbit consists of muscle meat, fur, organs, bones, and you're looking at all of those pieces within it, and it's not a lot. Think of what's inside the rabbit, but the biggest piece I think most pet owners forget is the bone and the organ. Bone is what gives you calcium, and then phosphorus is, when you look at muscle meat, is where your dog is going to get phosphorus from. And it, for a good mineral balance, you need calcium and phosphorus together. So you need to have those 2 elements. And then the other is organ. That's where they're going to get their iron. That's where they're going to get all of those, some of their or not their calcium, but their copper and their zinc, it's, from the organ meat that they eat. So, and that's when your dog is starting to look at a balanced meal, is that's what they're really looking at. So when you mention the meat that I think we actually shop at the same provider, Raw Dog Food Company, and when Dee Dee mixes it, she's mixing bone and organ in the package on a 10, probably about a 10 to 15% ratio of bone to muscle meat, and then also putting in that 10 to 12% ratio for organ meat as well into the diet. And so then that's what's creating that balance that comes into there. But making sure that you're putting in that organ and bone is critical. Now, for your puppy, you started to talk about puppies a little bit and the amount you're going to feed a puppy. When you do that, do you increase the calcium for a puppy's diet?
I don't, because I don't actually believe in micromanaging nutrients. So my approach is whole food. What did I say before? Whole food, like dietary additions. I don't even like the word supplements, because a lot of blends, a lot of commercial blends will have synthetic supplements, and you have no idea how those are reacting in the pet's body. So I go with the balanced blend. A lot of them start 80-10-10, but then there's other things that I might add in, things like chicken feet. So okay, this is weird. People aren't used to doing this type of thing. Chicken feet, you literally can, if they're real small, if they're small dogs like my dogs, you can take those chicken feet and boil them and make them into bone broth and get a lot of those same nutrients. Or a big dog, you can just give them the chicken feet to chew on, but those have additional cartilage, collagen. We're giving the puppy or an adult dog those nutrients for healthy bones and joints. And it's in addition, to these basic blends. So you can add in things like fish. You can buy whole frozen fish that, especially the like sardines, mackerel, herring, those types of things that have the bone in. So you're getting a little bit extra. But I think what's so important about feeding the ground bone instead of the synthetics is, like you were saying, Matt, it's the balance. You've got the correct ratio of calcium to phosphorus and any other minerals that the puppy needs. And I think if you start adding in a singular nutrient, like you say, well, it's a puppy, maybe we need some more calcium, you're going to throw those ratios off and you're going to end up doing more harm than good.
Yeah, that's a great point. And you'll notice that in the health of your dog, if you're feeding too much calcium, you're going to see that, diarrhea, you're going to see that they're urinating more. They're trying to excrete out the excess calcium out of their body. So just by you being observant and aware, it'll kind of point to where you should be feeding or what you should be increasing, or whether or not you might see a mineral imbalance inside your animal as well from feeding raw. But it being that the food is bioavailable, as long as you're sticking with that mix, and you had mentioned 80-10-10 as a start, as long as you're feeding that, you're going to see a healthy balance that is going to come out of it. But then definitely with observing your pet and having a good vet like Dr. Judy to have a conversation with, that's where you have that opportunity to dial in their health instead of taking big foods advice and, let's say the big food companies, Mars, Purina, and them just telling you, nope, that's what you need. But it doesn't answer the question why you're 50% of dogs, and you're saying even more, are dying of cancer over the age of 10. It's because of all that synthetic is just not bioavailable for them. So then, okay, I'm going to feed raw and I'm going to make this step and do it. What other concerns should I be looking out for? Should I be looking out for where I get my food, or if I buy a frozen patty like Answers or Stella and Chewy's or something like that, is there a process that I should look for on the label before I go buy it?
Yeah, you want to know the sourcing. First of all, you want to make sure it's not coming from factory farming. So ideally, it's free range, grass fed, pasture raised animals. Getting like a certified organic raw food pretty hard to do to get everything like that certified organic, because it's really expensive for the producers to go down that road, and it's just not cost effective. It would cost so much that it wouldn't be affordable. But the main thing, avoid the factory farming, or that they're using, you know, rendered meat, you know, dead or diseased or dying. They call the 3Ds. You know, you don't want them using that. You want them using healthy animals as their base. So you want to look at sourcing, and then you want to look at how it's processed. There's a very common process now called HPP, which is high pressure pasteurization. And it's a way of eliminating bacteria. And it's kind of a CYA thing for the manufacturers, because they say, well, we're going to take this extra step, and the FDA tends to leave them alone a little bit more. But basically they're taking that end product, putting it under a lot of pressure, which can kill pathogens. It's also destroying nutrients. So I don't recommend HPP. And unfortunately, a lot of the commercial lines are going that way. So you do want to ask that question, whether or not they're doing the HPP processing. I prefer blends that are balanced with the organ and bone rather than produce and synthetics. I believe we can create a completely balanced diet using animal products. Now, if you want to give your dog a piece of carrot or cucumber or something because they like it as a little snack, that's fine. But I think, we don't know what nutrients our vegetables have anymore. A lot of them, even if they're organic, are grown in depleted soil. So I think that's a big nutritional guessing game. If we're saying, okay, I would expect that kale has these nutrients and broccoli has these nutrients and zucchini has these nutrients. So I'm going to put those in there to help balance it out. I think that's too much of a crapshoot. And I think it's much more solid nutrition if you balance with adding in the organ meats. And I actually will get additional organ only blends and bump up that organ meat a little bit for my dogs, so that they get a little extra. And then also rotating the proteins. So by feeding different proteins, every protein, so whether it's the beef versus turkey versus duck versus fish, are going to have different nutritional profiles. And by rotating them, you're giving more well-rounded nutrition. So that, in my opinion, that's the best way to balance a diet, is through the animal products. And this is what dogs are, it's what they're meant to eat. And I see dogs thrive on this all the time. Actually, cats too. You can use these same principles for cats.
Yeah, you hit a big one, is balancing out, not just the muscle meat, organ, and bone ratios, but you're actually adding a variety. Because if you think of your dog as a scavenger and they're out there, they're just looking for meals, they may get a rabbit on Tuesday, they may find a duck on Wednesday, they may find, entrails of a deer or venison or cow or whatever it is on Thursday. So being a scavenger is kind of putting yourself in your dog's paws. I was going to say shoes, but paws more aptly. And so putting yourself in your dog's paws and really thinking like they would think, this is what we want to eat. And by adding that variety, you're actually adding different levels of nutrients within it. And we notice this during testing. And we notice this is when we test dogs, and we test dogs and we take a look at what they have been feeding on the intake form, you can see whether or not it is a balanced meal or not. The ones that scare me are the intake forms that we receive, which is one that we received recently, that I'm very concerned about getting their test results back. Not concerned about their test results, but I'm concerned for the pet, is because there was only one source and they were feeding chicken and rice as their raw food source. And they were cooking the chicken, which, as we know, pulls out the nutrients out of the actual cooked meat. So when you turn it from raw to cooked, you're actually decreasing the amount of nutrients inside the food that you're feeding. And so seeing that the individual is just feeding chicken and rice, you know that there is going to be deficiencies in regards to calcium, iron levels, you're going to see arsenic increase because of the rice. So you can almost pinpoint as you go into some of these levels of how you actually can improve a dog's health by just putting yourself in your dog's paws.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
And walking through it. And so that's, from all of these type of areas, really getting a good source, like having a good vet like Dr. Judy. Well, I think your food source also, like we are very fortunate being here in Colorado, we have Raw Dog Food Company from Dee Dee Mercer. She does an incredible job on blending and she's passionate about it. And she talks about all that, but she serves she serves the Colorado Front Range area and in the mountains a little bit, but not everybody is going to get that. So if I don't have a supplier like Raw Dog Food Company, who should I or how can I find somebody like that?
Yeah. Well, they do ship. I mean, with
Right.
food, it it gets a little more expensive because you're paying the shipping costs. But I feel that,
Right.
investing in raw feeding is super important. I mean, it's just the best thing that you can do for your pet. So even
Mhm.
if it costs a little bit more to have things shipped in, then I think it's worth it. But if you
Yep.
need to do local sourcing, and I consult with people all over the country, and I talk to some people in some rural areas where they don't even have like pet stores nearby.
Mm.
But then I'll ask, well, do you have a butcher? And I will talk to people, can you recreate this 80-10-10 grind?
Mhm.
Or even a little more. Like I said, I like to get a little more on the organ meats. If you have a butcher or you have a local, grower, rancher,
Mhm.
talk to them and say,
Mhm.
because there's all those scraps have to go somewhere. And
Mhm.
if you talk to them about the blend and the percentages that you're looking for,
Mhm.
you might be able to get them to put together something for
Mhm.
you. It doesn't hurt to ask. Again, it's probably a good idea to get some guidance from somebody that's
Mhm.
familiar with, raw feeding, if you're
Mhm.
going to be, putting together your own.
Correct. Yeah, but that's a great point is you're looking at your butcher if you're in a rural area. Also, type in a Google search and type, raw dog food in your area and see what pops up. Make sure you're watching though in Google the ads that pop up because they're purchased ads and they're going to be at the top,
Mm-hmm.
and really get down to see if you can find a local supplier like Raw Dog Food Company or somebody like that.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
yeah.
And the other thing too is, I mean, I think kibble is just awful. There are no
Mm.
good kibbles out there.
Yeah.
If you have trouble sourcing the raw, or, maybe you're just not ready to go there 100%. I think a good intermediate are the freeze dried and dehydrated raw products. So
Hmm.
basically these are, they're taking this balanced meal and they're drying it so they're shelf stable. So they're easier to
Yeah.
ship. You can order them like probably off of Amazon or Chewy's or any of those places. And
Hmm.
you're at least getting your pet off of the kibble, which is the most important
Hmm.
thing. So I say that
Yeah.
because I see a lot of people they're like, okay, raw just feels too overwhelming. I don't know that I can do it. It's going to be hard to get. And then they just keep feeding kibble. Well,
Mm.
there's no excuses here because there's another kind
Mm.
of intermediate option. And I also find that in some pets that are sick, that have had a lot of gut insult, they've been on a lot of
Mhm.
medications.
Yeah.
Sometimes going with that dehydrated or the freeze dried as an
Mhm.
intermediate step can be useful. But again, in those cases, you really should be getting medical guidance through the process.
Yeah, absolutely. But yeah, but I mean, and from what I heard you say is there is no excuse. Is
There's no
start,
excuse.
walk down that road, make that leap. There are a ton of suppliers you can get online. You can buy product online. There's no reason why you can't start feeding your dog raw. Is and make it very easy on yourself too. Is even from the preparation, like I'll prepare on Sunday night for the entire week. So it's all prepped, ready to go. I don't have to worry about where I'm going to get it from. And, I have it in the fridge, and both my wife and my kids can easily feed Leo and Mr. Chacha raw.
Mhm.
And so, really, is by just taking a few little small steps forward, knowing that you are improving the health of your pet, and you're really helping them by living a life that they were meant to live.
Yeah. And you know what I suggest to people too, don't believe us, just try it for a month. You don't have to, don't do it forever. Just say, you can do anything for a month, right? Just, find some products, do it for a month and then see what you notice in your pet, because you're probably going to notice your pet being just a whole lot healthier.
Yeah. Well, you notice like just right on the surface level, their coat is softer. Their breath may improve. Like
they won't itch as much and their stools are better and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah. Like, and you talk about stools. I mean, that's something that I noticed with Leo. Like there's no more diarrhea. There's no more run. It is really just on that side. It's solid, and you look at it and he's happier and he's healthier. And recently we just had Leo tested for with our test, the hair tissue mineral analysis, and he was just, and all we do is feed him raw. Every once in a while I'll put an egg in his diet, every once in a while I'll add a can of sardines, but I've kept it really simple because I have 2 teenagers and it is really, I don't want to add supplements and I didn't want to add all this stuff. And so I just kept it simple. His report came back right straight across the midline range, which means he was green on all levels. The only one he was low on was iron. That was in the red, that was low. But now that I know that, that's an easy fix, is just buy an organ blend.
Yeah, add a little extra organ meat in. Absolutely. So easy to do. So easy to fix. You don't have to go with the synthetics. You're staying with the, the whole food program, and oh gosh, pets are just so much healthier.
So, and the reason why I said that is don't think about, what are all these supplements that I need to add to the diet now that I'm feeding raw. Raw will assume that what the amount of nutrients that your dog needs, if it's a balanced meal, your dog will be receiving the right amount of levels.
Yeah. And another thing I tell people, because a lot of people feed a lot of supplements just because they want to be doing the best thing for their dog. And a lot of times you can take all that money you're spending on the supplements and put it towards the food, and you don't have to feed them. And I'm not talking, medications that their dog has a medical condition, that's different, but the actual supplements, a lot of times you can eliminate those if you get your dog on a balanced fresh food diet.
And it'll actually probably be cheaper than feeding kibble with supplements, because you're adding all these extras into it. So so when you look at raw feeding, it is not any more expensive by the time you add all of those bases coming in. Now, if you're feeding Old Roy from Walmart, you're not worried about the health of your pet, because that's not good for their
right. So I would hope most people would, make that leap. But it can be feeding fresh food can be affordable too. It doesn't have to completely break the budget. Just talk to people in the industry and have them help you get started doing it. And it's gonna, I look at it as pay now or pay later. If you're going to cut corners on the nutrition, you are going to be paying to treat some chronic disease on down the road. I can just about guarantee it.
Yep, I definitely agree. Dr. Judy, thank you so much for helping every one of our watchers and listeners out there make this leap in this transition. If they were waiting on whether or not they were going to do it, this hopefully gives them that push to make it happen. So if they were going to contact you and they wanted to talk about raw feeding, how best can they get a hold of you, Dr. Judy?
Well, my website is ahavet.com. My business is Animal Healing Arts. The email is info@ahavet.com, and our phone number is 720-515-2421.
Awesome. And you can always reach out to us, ParsleyPet.com, where we will actually share with you. We can test the nutrients that are inside your dog, and it'll point to what different types of food or different levels of food for that balanced meal that you need to achieve. So definitely check us out at ParsleyPet.com. And Dr. Judy, thank you so much for today's show.
It's my pleasure. Thank you, Matt.
Oh, you're welcome. And we'll see everybody next week.
Bye.